felt dizzy after dinner. Weeks later, I discovered my son and his wife had poisoned me for my $3 million estate. The roast tasted metallic. That was the first sign. Subtle, almost forgettable. But then came the heat in my chest, the tremble in my hands, the tightening behind my eyes, like someone pulling threads from inside my skull. I was sitting at my own table, in my own house, watching my only son pour me another glass of wine. "Just relax, Mom," Derek said, his smile tight. Too perfect, like it had been practiced. Monica sat beside him, slicing her chicken with a porcelain smile and barely touching her plate. She looked up at me once, that fake warmth flickering like a dying bulb. "Are you okay, Evelyn? You look a little pale." I nodded, but I wasn't okay. I felt like the floor was tilting beneath me. That's when I collapsed. I remember the cold tile against my cheek, the sound of a fork clattering to the floor. Monica's voice somewhere above me. "Oh no, she fainted." Then Derek's voice, lower, sharper, closer to what I now know was his truth. "Finally." That word stayed with me, even in the darkness of the ambulance lights, even when the pain blurred into static and my body stopped listening to itself. Finally. They thought I was dying. They wanted me dead. And I might have been, if not for the neighbor's dog. I found that out much later, how the barking startled Monica so badly she forgot to lock the front door behind the paramedics. How the EMT who arrived recognized me, remembered I'd donated to his sister's school. That's why they rushed. That's why I survived. But I didn't wake up grateful. I woke up furious. Because the last thing I remembered before the blackness took me was my son smiling like he'd just won. I woke up to beeping machines and fake sympathy, but their eyes betrayed them. They thought I was already gone. The ICU smelled like plastic and bleach. Every breath hurt. My throat burned from the tube they'd shoved down it, and my hands were bruised from the IVs. But I was alive. I knew that much. I turned my head and saw the nurse watching me closely. She leaned in and whispered, "You're lucky someone found you in time. Another hour and—" She didn't finish. She didn't need to. I tried to speak but choked on dryness. She gave me ice chips and told me to rest. But my brain wouldn't rest. It kept repeating Derek's voice over and over again. Finally, 2 hours later, he arrived. My son. My boy. The same one who used to cry if I left his side at the grocery store now walked in, holding grocery store flowers with a smirk that didn't match the occasion. "Hey, Mom," he said too casually, "you gave us a scare." Us. Meaning Monica, who stood behind him holding a gift bag like she was visiting a coworker with a cold. "Oh, don't worry," she chirped. "We brought your favorite lotion and some of those cookies you like. Have the doctor said anything about long-term effects? You know, memory or coordination." She tried to sound sweet. She didn't know I'd heard him. She didn't know I remembered. I played weak. I let my eyes flutter closed like I was too tired to answer. Let them believe I was slow, confused, fragile. But inside, my rage burned hotter than any fever they'd checked me for. Because I finally understood. They weren't scared I'd died. They were disappointed I hadn't. And when Monica leaned in and whispered, "Maybe this is a sign to start updating things, just in case," I smiled with my eyes closed. Just in case? Oh, sweetheart, I already had. They loved my money more than they ever loved me, and I fed that monster with open hands, thinking it was love. I lay there in that hospital bed pretending to drift off, but inside I was unraveling. Every memory, every sacrifice sliced through me like razors. I didn't just raise a son. I gave him everything, and he sold me for it. After my husband died, Derek cried in my arms like a boy again, said he'd never let anything happen to me. I believed him, and maybe that's the worst part, because I wasn't just betrayed, I was played. I paid off the down payment on their first house because Monica's parents couldn't help. I funded Derek's real estate business because no bank believed in his vision. I even lent them money for IVF, though they never followed through with the treatments. But they knew the word baby made me soft. They knew exactly how to use it. When they asked for help, I gave it. When they didn't ask, I still offered. I sat their kids through fevers, school plays, tantrums. I made birthday cakes, drove them to recitals. When Monica's mother got sick, I helped with the bills. They never said thank you, not once. But I didn't need thanks. I just wanted to be loved. What I never imagined was that they were counting down the years. That somewhere behind every smile, they were waiting for me to go, waiting for me to die so they could split the spoils. And that night at the dinner table, when I collapsed and Monica didn't even scream, just knelt beside me with those rehearsed, panicked eyes, I knew. They weren't going to wait anymore. They were done pretending. But they'd made one mistake. I lived. And I wasn't going to let that go to waste. They were going to learn what it felt like to lose everything. Not in a scream, not in a fight, but in silence. The same silence they left me in. They tried to bury me in silence. Now I would destroy them in the same way. The discharge office was too bright, too polite. A week later, the nurse smiled like I was any other patient leaving after a bad fall or a touch of pneumonia. She handed me the paperwork, a stack so thick I could have used it as a weapon, and said, "You're free to go, Ms. Dawson. Be sure to follow up with your primary." I smiled. I nodded. And then I slipped the manila envelope into my purse like it was nothing. Inside, the toxicology report. A soft print confirmation of what I already knew in my bones. Belladonna. Crushed. Diluted. Mixed into my wine. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't too much salt in the food or a bad reaction to my medication. It was a plan. Someone went out of their way to buy a poison, used in ancient murders and fairy tales, and fed it to me in my own home. Monica had poured the wine. Derek had raised his glass. "Finally," he'd said, as if this was a celebration. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I walked slowly to the exit, gripping the arm of the volunteer escort like a frail old lady. I let them see what they expected, a weak woman heading home alone. But inside, I wasn't broken. I was sharpened. They thought they had won. Thought I'd die quietly, and they'd cry at the funeral just long enough to claim the house, the money, the land. Thought no one would ask questions. They'd get the estate and call it inheritance. But now I had proof. I had timing. And I had one more thing they'd never considered. I had patience. I waited until I got into the cab. Until we were 5 blocks from the hospital and the driver was humming something off-key. Then I pulled out my phone and dialed. "Klein and Barrett Law," the assistant answered. "It's Evelyn Dawson," I said, steady. "I need to speak with Mr. Klein. Today. He's in court until 3. Tell him this is about my will. He'll understand." Silence. Then, "1 moment, ma'am." Less than a minute later, the line clicked. "Evelyn?" His voice hadn't changed in decades. Firm, unhurried, loyal. He'd handled our estate since Harold passed. Watched my son grow up. Helped me file insurance when the storm tore through our summer house. And warned me about 2 generous gifts more times than I could count. "I need to come in," I said. "Something's happened." "Are you all right?" "No," I said, "but I will be. I have a copy of a toxicology report, and I want to update the will." A pause. Not long, just long enough for him to register that whatever this was, it wasn't about fairness anymore. It was about revenge. "I'll clear the afternoon." "Thank you, Robert." I ended the call and sat back in the cab, watching the streets blur past. I didn't go to the police. Not yet. I didn't tell friends or neighbors. I wanted them to feel safe, untouchable. I wanted them to keep showing up with casseroles and fake tears. I wanted them to keep thinking they'd won, because when it hit, it wouldn't be loud. It wouldn't be dramatic. It would be everything, and they wouldn't even see it coming. When I got home, I stepped into the garden shed behind the house. Dust clung to everything. Tools, planters, old boxes of Harold's fishing gear. But in the corner, just where I remembered, sat the storage bin labeled Dog Cam. Back when we had Bella and Max, we'd used a pair of nanny cams to keep an eye on them while we were away. Cheap little things, barely the size of an egg, but they recorded sound and movement. Harold hated them. I kept them anyway. I wiped one off, plugged it in. The tiny green light blinked once, then turned solid. Still worked. I tested it on the kitchen table, then in the guest bathroom. The footage came through on the old iPad I still used for recipe books. Blurry, but clear enough to see hands in tea, voices in the hallway, lies that thought they were safe behind closed doors. I placed one camera behind a stack of recipe cards in the kitchen, right where Monica always hovered when she played helpful daughter-in-law. The other, I tucked inside a fake plant in the bathroom. I angled it toward the medicine cabinet. Derek always rummaged when he thought I wasn't looking. I wasn't just watching anymore. I was collecting. That same afternoon, Monica called. Her voice was all honey and silk. "How are you feeling, Evelyn?" "Better, I hope." "We were thinking of dropping by with some lasagna. Derek made it himself." "Isn't that sweet?" I lied. "I'd love to see you both." Let the show begin. That evening, I laid out the table, dimmed the lights, wore the soft cardigan Derek bought me last Christmas, still had the tag on it, but I figured he'd appreciate the performance. Monica brought a casserole dish and a white paper bag with a sleepy bear drawn on it. "I thought you might want to try these," she said, pulling out a small jar of loose-leaf chamomile. "For your nerves, natural, soothing, perfect for sleep." I smiled. So thoughtful. She offered to make the tea herself. I let her, sat there and watched her move around my kitchen like she owned it. She poured 2 cups. I sipped mine. 1 sip. No more. She watched closely. They stayed half an hour. Derek asked about the estate, about whether I was still meeting with Mr. Klein. "You should take it easy, Mom. Don't stress about paperwork." "I'll try," I said. After they left, I poured the rest of the tea into a stainless steel travel bottle, screwed the lid tight, and slipped it into the back of the fridge. The next morning, I called Carl, the retired pharmacist Harold used to play poker with. He still worked part-time at the local pharmacy and owed me a favor. I handed him the bottle with no explanation, just said, "I need to know what's in this." He called 2 days later. "Zolpidem," he said, "a sedative. In that amount? It would have knocked a woman your age out cold for hours. Dangerous dosage." I didn't flinch, I just whispered thank you. Then I went home, looked into the kitchen camera and said softly, "Smile for the camera, sweetheart, you're done." They thought I was frail, but frailty is not weakness, it's camouflage, and they were getting careless. I was pushing my cart through the grocery store, halfway between the pears and the overpriced gluten-free section, when I heard my name. Not directly. Not like they knew I was there. I froze, half hidden behind a display of canned peaches. "She'll be gone by winter," a voice said. "Trust me, it's basically ours." "Derek?" I peeked through the aisle gap. He stood with a man I didn't recognize, probably some poor fool he was trying to impress. Dressed in that business casual arrogance he always wore when he wanted to seem smarter than he was. "The paperwork's already being prepped," Derek said, tossing a box of granola into his basket. "She's old. Slow, keeps forgetting things. It'll be a clean transition. No mess, no court battle." My hand tightened on the cart handle. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. That wasn't confidence, that was certainty. He thought it was done. He thought I was already dead. I stood there with my heart pounding like a war drum, surrounded by strawberries and coupons, and knew I wasn't playing defense anymore. I was hunting. I waited until he turned the corner, oblivious to the woman he'd once kissed on the forehead every Christmas morning. Then I left the store, abandoned the cart, drove straight home without the milk I'd come for. I sat at my kitchen table, the one they'd tried to poison me at, and pulled out my journal. The one I'd started the night I returned from the hospital. I wrote it all down. His words, the location, the exact time. Then I opened the safe in my bedroom closet, pulled out the USB drive I'd been feeding like a fire for weeks. Every clip, every whisper, every moment Monica leaned just a little too close to my teacup. They were building a future on my grave, and they didn't realize I'd already crawled out of it. That night, I moved the footage to 2 separate flash drives. One went into the safe deposit box I rented under Janine's name, my home caregiver and the only person who'd seen me cry without turning it into strategy. The second I sealed in an envelope, labeled in my lawyer's handwriting, to be opened only upon my death or disappearance. I wasn't scared anymore. I was insulted. Because Derek wasn't even smart about it. He was sloppy, arrogant. And Monica? She played the long game with poison tea and mascara tears, but she never considered I might already be 5 steps ahead. They thought I'd go quietly. They thought old age meant surrender. They didn't realize I was just getting started. The final straw wasn't the poison. It wasn't even the whisper in the produce aisle. It was the way he said ours, like I was just a placeholder, a walking wallet with a failing pulse. That's when I knew they wouldn't just lose everything. They'd watch me take it back, with eyes wide open, and nothing to stop it. I didn't need comfort. I needed a weapon, and Robert Klein had always known where to aim. The law office hadn't changed in 40 years. Same blue carpet that crunched faintly beneath your shoes. Same gold-trimmed door with R.J. Klein Esquire etched into the frosted glass. Same smell, leather, old coffee, and quiet war. He stood when I walked in. Evelyn, just my name. No questions, no pleasantries. I sat down hard, my bones still aching from the hospital cot. I handed him the envelope, and he didn't flinch when the words toxicology report stared up from the flap. He opened it and read in silence. His lips moved just slightly as his eyes tracked the data. Belladonna, he murmured. They tried to kill you. I nodded. And they smiled while they did it. He looked at me over his glasses. I saw something shift in his face. Not pity. Not concern. Calculation. The kind I needed. I reached into my purse and pulled out the flash drive. Silver. Unlabeled. Cold from the metal lockbox I kept under my bed. I slid it across the desk. Keep this somewhere they'll never touch it. He picked it up between 2 fingers. What's on it? Footage. Sound. Monica dropping sedatives in my tea. Derek whispering, she's too weak to fight anymore. They weren't careful. They thought I'd already checked out. Robert's brow furrowed as he turned the drive in his hand, weighing more than just its plastic frame. There's more, I said, pulling out a printed log from my folder. This is a timeline. Every visit, every strange incident. Medication I never remembered ordering. Strange charges to my pharmacy account. Even a withdrawal from my savings I didn't authorize, 2 days before I collapsed. He thumbed through the pages in silence. Then he looked up. This is enough to indict them. Eventually, I said. But not yet. I want them relaxed. I want them to keep lying. The more they talk, the deeper the hole they dig. He slid the flash drive into a red folder marked ED Confidential and locked it in the safe behind his bookshelf without saying another word. His hands were steady. Mine weren't. I've got another copy hidden, I said. Safe deposit box in Janine's name. But if they come for me before this is over, I want you holding the blade. You're assuming they'll try again. No, I said. I'm assuming they already are. He leaned back, and the room filled with a long, heavy pause. Then, what about the estate plan revisions? I want them in writing by Friday, I said. I want notarized copies. I want it filed with the county and digitally stored in 3 separate places. One at your office, one with my bank, and one with Janine. I can do that. And the trust? I'll move everything, house, investment accounts, cash reserves, into an irrevocable trust in Janine's name. But Evelyn, you understand what that means, don't you? I do. Once it's done, not even you can reverse it. I didn't blink. Good. Robert tapped the edge of the table. If they come back, if they push legally, we'll have enough to show intent. Attempted murder, elder abuse, fraud, especially if the cameras catch anything else. They will, I said. They always come back when they smell the money. He smiled grimly. And when they do, I stood, buttoned my coat slowly, carefully. When they do, I said, I want to be sipping tea on the porch they thought they'd inherit, while they watched the sheriff padlock their front door. He didn't try to stop me, didn't offer condolences, just handed me the receipt for the revised will and said quietly, They won't see this coming. I walked out of that office feeling like the funeral they were planning for me had just become their own. And I wasn't even going to send flowers. They wanted me gone. Instead, I showed up with a smile and lit the fuse with one sentence. Derek's backyard had always felt performative, like a showroom staged for envy. String lights hung too neatly. The grill too clean. Lawn furniture arranged like magazine pages, not a place people actually lived. Monica stood by the patio table in her white dress like she'd wandered off the set of a luxury detergent ad, holding a mimosa and laughing too loudly at something no one said. They didn't expect me to come, I made sure of that. I walked through the gate without announcing myself. Let the hush fall naturally, like a curtain, eyes turned. Glasses stilled midair. Derek raised his eyebrows and forced a smile. "Mom," he said, surprised, trying to cover irritation. "Wasn't sure you were coming." "I wasn't either," I replied, placing the wrapped bundt cake Janine had made onto the table. "But I thought family time. Life's short, isn't it?" Monica flinched at that. Almost spilled her drink. Good. I let the small talk flow for a while. Sat through half a hot dog and a dry comment from Derek about how I looked stronger than last time. I nodded along, sipping sparkling water, watching them. They didn't know. Not yet. Not that the accounts were gone. Not that the will was burned and rewritten. Not that every last loophole was sealed shut with legal iron. I waited until the kids went inside. Until the music got low. Until Monica leaned in and offered to fix me another drink, if I was up for it. Then I turned to Derek and said it calmly, right between a bite of potato salad and the flicker of his cigarette lighter. "I've updated my will. Everything's transparent now, fully protected." He froze, just for a moment. But I saw it, the twitch in his cheek, the flash of confusion, then panic, then calculation. Monica wasn't as good at hiding it. She dropped her glass. The stem snapped. Orange juice and champagne pooled like a warning across the tablecloth. "Oh," she said too quickly. That's great," I smiled. "Isn't it? No more ambiguity. Everything's in writing. Assets secured in a trust, clean and binding. No surprises." Derek cleared his throat. "You didn't need to do that, Mom. We've always said, whatever you want. It's your choice." That was the first honest thing he'd said in years. Because it was my choice, and I had made it. Monica tried to laugh it off. "Well, as long as you're taken care of, that's all that matters." "Oh, I am," I said. "More than you could imagine." I let the silence stretch long enough to make them sweat. Then I leaned back, sipped from my glass, and looked out over the manicured lawn they probably thought would one day be theirs. "You know," I said, almost wistfully, "it's funny how clarity comes. You spend a lifetime giving, thinking love will be enough. But then one day, you wake up and realize some people only loved the giving, not the giver." Derek tried to speak. I didn't let him. I stood, adjusted my sweater, and turned to leave. "Oh," I added casually over my shoulder, "and Robert says hi. He was very impressed with the footage." I didn't look back. Let them wonder what I meant. Let them scramble through old lies, looking for cracks. The power had shifted, and I was holding the fuse. It wasn't grief I felt anymore. It was release, and underneath it, something colder. Resolve. The house was quiet. Not peaceful, just quiet. Like the moment before a storm breaks open. I sat on the edge of my bed, the old quilt pulled around my shoulders, even though it wasn't cold. Janine had gone home for the night. The hallway lights were off. The clock ticked softly beside me, each second an echo. And in my lap, the old photo album. The leather binding was worn smooth, the pages a little stiff from age and fingerprints. I hadn't opened it in years. The first picture on the page was Derek, 7 years old. His hair stuck up from a summer buzz cut, his cheeks freckled and glowing from too much sun. He had his arms wrapped around my leg like I was his whole world. I remembered the day. He had just caught a frog, barefoot and grinning, begging me to let him keep it. I traced the outline of his small face with a fingertip. "Why did you stop loving me?" I whispered. The room didn't answer. Just the clock ticking. I turned the page. There he was again. High school graduation, arms thrown over my shoulders. Another page. Our front porch. The Christmas after his father died. Both of us holding mugs of cider. His smile wasn't real, even then. I saw it now, in hindsight. Tight, composed, hollow. Was that when it started? When Harold passed? Was that the moment he stopped being my son and started seeing me as leverage? The ache behind my ribs wasn't sadness anymore. It was realization. I had already mourned him, mourned the boy he used to be, the man I thought he was. But tonight, sitting under a lamp with ghosts pressed between plastic sleeves, I didn't feel grief. I felt done. And in that emptiness, a sharp clarity settled in. He didn't love me, not the way I'd fooled myself into believing. He loved what I gave, what I represented, security, property, access. And Monica? She never bothered pretending. Her affection had always been hollow praise and careful flattery, compliments with strings, smiles with motives. But now, finally, I saw it all for what it was. A campaign, long and deliberate. They weren't impatient, they were calculating. And I had been generous to a fault. But that ended tonight. I snapped the album shut, stood up, and walked to the mirror across the room, looked into the eyes of a woman who'd been hunted by her own child. She didn't look scared. She looked ready. There was only one job left now. Not survival. I'd already done that. Not revenge. Not exactly. Justice. Closure. A reckoning. Because the footage was secure. The documents filed. The estate protected. All that remained was the final strike. The moment that would make them face the life they could have had they chosen love instead of greed. They wouldn't lose what I gave. They'd lose what they never deserved to want. And I'd be right there, watching them fall from the throne they built out of my coffin. My hand was steady as I turned off the light. Tomorrow, I'd begin the final act. Family isn't blood. It's who holds your hand without a knife in the other. The notary office was tucked between a pawn shop and an abandoned dry cleaner. Nothing grand, nothing worth noticing, just how I wanted it. No fanfare, no traceable footprints. Quiet revenge lives in the paperwork. Janine drove me. She thought we were finalizing an insurance policy. She even packed a snack bag with ginger cookies, like always. She didn't know she was about to become the sole beneficiary of a $3 million estate. We sat in the waiting room, her flipping through a dog-eared magazine, while I clutched the manila folder in my lap. Inside were years of sacrifice, savings, and betrayal turned into numbers. Account authorizations, property deeds, share portfolios Harold built over decades, with coffee-stained ledgers and stock tickers he never quite trusted. All of it was about to move, away from the people who tried to poison me into the grave and straight into the hands of someone who once washed my hair when I couldn't lift my arms. Evelyn Dawson, the receptionist called. I stood. We're ready. Inside the small, glass-walled room, the notary flipped through the documents like it was any other Wednesday. A social worker sat beside him, required presence when seniors make large transfers. Her eyes lingered on me with professional caution. I didn't care. Let them watch. I slid the paperwork across the table, page by page. Property? Transferred. Accounts? Sealed into the trust. Medical proxy? Reassigned. Everything that once had my son's name floating around it, gone. Evaporated. Then came the moment. I, Evelyn Dawson, hereby name Janine Ellis sole trustee and beneficiary of my estate, real and financial, effective immediately and irrevocably. Janine blinked like she hadn't heard it right. Wait, what? I turned to her. She sat stiff, hands in her lap, eyes wide behind her glasses. You're putting everything in my name? Yes, but I'm not. Her voice cracked. I'm not family. I looked her straight in the eyes. You never tried to kill me. That's good enough. The notary raised his eyebrows. The social worker dropped her pen. Janine opened her mouth, then closed it again. Evelyn, I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Just hold on to it like it's mine, because it still is. Until I'm gone. After that, live how you want. I've already lived for everyone else. Her hand reached for mine. Soft, steady, honest. No performance. No rehearsed gratitude. Just real, quiet loyalty. When the last page was signed and stamped, the notary slid the documents back into the folder and handed it to me. Final. Legal. Binding. The weight of it was incredible. Not because of what I was giving away, but because of who I was taking it from. My bloodline had betrayed me, but the woman who brought me soup when I had pneumonia was now the steward of everything they once plotted to steal. Outside, the sun hit the sidewalk just so. Warm, blinding, cleansing. Janine helped me into the car. "You're going to get calls, Evelyn," she said softly. "When they find out," I smiled. "Let them call. Let them scream. Let them beg. Let them finally understand what it feels like to be cut off. Not from money, from me." It was almost midnight when the doorbell rang. 3 sharp presses. Urgent, aggressive. Not the kind you hear from someone bringing soup or asking about the weather. I was in the kitchen, sipping the tea I made from leaves I bought under lights paid for by decades of quiet work and sacrifice. I didn't jump. I didn't even flinch. Let her come. I opened the door to find Monica, barefoot, face flushed, eyeliner running like cracked ink. She swayed in place, gripping a crumpled handbag like it might hold her last chance at control. "You think you're clever?" She slurred. "You think you can just take it all and walk away like we don't matter?" I said nothing, just opened the door a few inches wider, stepped aside, and let her in. She stomped past me, her perfume sharp with alcohol and rage. Her heels clicked like accusations on the hardwood. In the kitchen, she spun around to face me. "You ungrateful old witch." There it was, the real Monica, the one who baked casseroles with crushed pills, the one who smiled while handing me poisoned wine. "You think we didn't earn it?" She snapped, slamming her purse onto the counter. "Derek has sacrificed everything for you. You wouldn't have half of that estate if not for his help with—" "Help?" I cut in. My voice was calm, cooler than she expected. "Is that what you call forging my signature on the pharmacy form last October?" She blinked. I stepped closer. "Or was it help when you slipped Zolpidem into my tea and then texted Derek?" "She's fading." Monica's mouth parted, but no words came. "You always talk too much," I said. "You were sloppy. You wanted the money but couldn't be patient. Now there's nothing left to wait for." She threw the mug I was holding. I ducked. It shattered against the wall, shards spraying across the floor. She screamed something incoherent, loud enough for the neighbors. That was fine. I'd already dialed the police. The call was still open. I made sure of that before I even opened the front door. "Get out of my house!" she shrieked, like it was hers. I stepped back. "It's not yours, and it never will be." The sirens weren't far. Monica didn't even hear them at first. She was too busy pointing at the cabinets, accusing me of manipulating Derek, of turning the kids against them, of stealing what's rightfully ours. The officers entered moments later. She tried to claw at my arm before they pulled her back. "She's crazy!" Monica screamed. "She's lying! You have no idea what she's." "She has a safe full of video evidence," one of the officers said, reading off the report. "And you just admitted on a live call that you were here to confront her over money she doesn't legally owe you." Monica went silent. Handcuffs clicked. Her face drained. She looked at me, then at the shattered mug on the floor, then back again. "You can't do this," she whispered. "I already did." They walked her out through the same door she barged in, barefoot and broken, mumbling something about lawyers and misunderstandings. I closed the door behind them. Then I sat back down at the kitchen table, picked up a fresh mug, and poured myself another cup. The tea was warm, quiet, just the way I liked it. And Monica? She still didn't know I'd already moved the final piece. All that was left now was checkmate. They thought it would stay private, quiet, hidden beneath smiles and bloodlines. But I dragged the truth into the light and left them nowhere to run. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not the temperature, the silence. No murmurs, no shuffling. just the weight of justice waiting to fall. I sat beside Robert Klein, calm in my Sunday coat, hands folded over my lap like I was at church. But this was no sermon. This was reckoning. Derek sat across from me at the defendant's table, jaw locked, dressed in a suit he hadn't worn since Harold's funeral. I remembered how he cried that day. Today, his face was stone. But I knew that look. I'd seen it when he lost a bid in his early real estate days, when the mask slipped and the temper boiled underneath. Beside him, Monica, still swollen from the alcohol, eyes ringed in red, lips tight like she wanted to scream. But she couldn't. Not here. Not under oath. The judge entered. The room rose. And then it began. The prosecution opened with the toxicology report, signed by Carl, clear as glass. Belladonna in her bloodstream. Dangerous concentration. Consistent with deliberate exposure. Next came the financial records. Bank transfers Derek had authorized under my name. Thousands, siphoned slowly over months, masked as repairs, assistance, and consulting fees. All traced, all real. Then the recordings. Robert slid the USB across the table. The bailiff plugged it into the monitor. I didn't watch the screen. I already knew every frame. I watched them. The first clip, Monica in my kitchen, humming as she crushed pills between 2 spoons, her fingers moving fast, mechanical, mixing the powder into tea while glancing over her shoulder. The second, Derek in the hallway, whispering into his phone, "She's weaker. Give it another week. She won't remember a thing." The third, me, pouring the untouched tea into a travel bottle. My voice calm, direct. "Smile for the camera, sweetheart. You're done." When that last line echoed through the courtroom speakers, Monica's mouth opened. No sound came out. The prosecutor stood. "Your Honor, we formally charge Derek Dawson and Monica Dawson with attempted murder, elder abuse, and financial fraud." Derek stood, fists clenched. "This is insane." "That footage is edited. You don't know the whole story." "The whole story?" I said aloud, finally. My voice didn't shake. "The whole story is you tried to kill your mother for a house, and you were too arrogant to think I'd outlive your plan." The judge banged the gavel once. Silence in the courtroom. But it was already silent. Not a breath, not a whisper, just the truth hanging in the air like a blade. Monica leaned toward her lawyer, whispering frantically. Derek stared at the table, like it might open up and swallow him. But nothing saved them. The judge looked over the evidence one final time. "Given the severity of the charges and the strength of evidence, I am denying bail for both defendants. They will be remanded to custody pending trial." The gavel dropped. Derek turned to me, face white. "You did this to us." "No," I said. "You did this." I just finally stopped pretending not to see it. The guards led them out. No handshakes, no hugs, no last glances, just the sound of their footsteps disappearing down the hall. And for the first time in years, I breathed easy. The emergency hearing took place just 5 days after the bail was denied. Robert told me it would move quickly, that once the evidence hit the court, there'd be no delay. Not for this, not when my life had been treated like collateral. We sat in the Superior Court Annex, a smaller courtroom this time. No audience, no reporters yet, just me, my lawyer, the clerk, and a judge with sharp eyes and no patience for games. Robert stood. "Your Honor, we're filing for permanent restraining orders against Derek and Monica Dawson on behalf of Evelyn Dawson. In addition, we're submitting verified toxicology results, financial manipulation records, and video surveillance footage that supports a clear, premeditated pattern of abuse and attempted harm." The judge held up the manila envelope. "This the same footage used in the elder abuse and attempted murder hearing?" "Yes," Robert said. "This hearing is specifically to protect the petitioner's estate and physical safety from further contact or harassment." The judge turned to me. "Ms. Dawson, is it your wish to bar these individuals from your property permanently?" I stood. I wanted to sit there quietly, let the lawyers talk, but this moment I needed to speak for myself. "They tried to poison me," I said. My voice was clear, sharp. "They drugged my tea and waited for me to die. Then they came smiling to my hospital bed and asked about the will. The judge nodded. Noted. Robert handed her the paperwork. Additionally, my client has executed full legal transfer of all real and financial assets into a trust already filed and verified. We request a protective clause be added to ensure neither Derek nor Monica Dawson may contest the trust, enter the premises, or claim access to any associated funds or properties. It was everything they wanted, everything they schemed for, and now it was behind glass, sealed, locked, untouchable. The judge reviewed it for less than 10 minutes. She didn't need more time. The evidence was that solid, the motive that obvious. I'm granting full permanent restraining orders effective immediately, she said. Derek and Monica Dawson are legally prohibited from contacting the petitioner or approaching within 300 feet of her home or any property held within her trust. Violations will result in immediate arrest and additional felony charges. She looked directly at me. Ms. Dawson, your home is protected. Your assets are protected. If they so much as step on your front porch again, call the sheriff. They won't get a second warning. I nodded. Thank you, Your Honor. Outside the courthouse, Robert handed me a fresh copy of the restraining orders. He looked tired, but satisfied. This is the final lock, he said. They're officially out. Legally. Permanently. I stared at the papers in my hand. I remembered Monica swanning through my kitchen like it already belonged to her. I remembered Derek picking out a new truck with the money he was certain would be his before the year ended. Now, they weren't even allowed on the driveway. They thought they could bury me, I murmured. But I just buried them, legally. Robert smiled faintly. You sure you want to keep the security cameras up? Yes, I said, slipping the papers into my purse. Let them see what they lost every time they drive past, and know they'll never touch it again. They hadn't just failed to take the estate, they'd been erased from it. Alive, conscious, and fully aware. That was the real sentence. It made the 6 o'clock news. I didn't ask for it. I didn't need the cameras or the reporters in their neat little suits. But I won't lie. It felt like justice when the anchor called me the sharpest widow in North Carolina. There I was, watching it unfold from the same floral armchair Derek once said I should replace with something more modern, the same chair he thought he'd be sitting in by now. The anchor's voice came through the speakers, clear as glass. In a stunning verdict today, the court ruled in favor of 74-year-old Evelyn Dawson, awarding her $2.7 million in restitution after uncovering years of financial fraud, elder abuse, and attempted poisoning by her own son and daughter-in-law. I turned up the volume. Janine paused in the doorway with my evening tea, fresh mint and honey, not a single sedative in sight. They showed Monica's mugshot first. Her eyes puffed, lips trembling, like she still couldn't believe the world had stopped letting her get away with murder. Monica Dawson was sentenced to 7 years in state prison for attempted manslaughter, conspiracy, and destruction of evidence. Her personal accounts, previously hidden under a false name in Delaware, were seized under court order. Next came Derek's face. God, he looked old. Like all the arrogance and fake charm had finally dried up and fallen off. Derek Dawson, former small business owner, was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison for attempted murder, wire fraud, identity theft, and elder abuse. His company's assets were liquidated and redirected as court-ordered restitution. Their house, foreclosed. Their vehicles, auctioned. Their future, cut at the root. I didn't celebrate. But I didn't cry either. I just sipped my tea. Janine sat across from me, quiet, hands in her lap, watching. I donated half of it, I said, to the women's shelter downtown, in Harold's name. Figured maybe someone else trying to escape a bad home could build a better one. She didn't say anything for a second. Then she smiled. He'd be proud. I think so too. The other half? I kept it. Not because I needed it, but because it was mine. Every cent they tried to take. Every penny they thought they were entitled to. The judge made sure of that. In her statement to the court, Mrs. Dawson said, "They didn't just try to take my money, they tried to erase me." but I'm still here, and they're not. I chuckled when I heard that line again. I'd meant every word. They thought they were getting an estate. Instead, they got bars, orange jumpsuits, and their names etched into court records that would follow them longer than their inheritance ever would have lasted. Revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't screaming in their faces or breaking down in court. It was this: sitting in my own home, the one I saved, watching them lose everything they plotted for. I took another sip. Steady hands, calm heart. They got what they deserved. And for once, I didn't have to lift a single finger to make it happen. I just stopped forgiving and let the truth do the rest. And that's the story. They tried to bury me quietly. Instead, the truth buried them, loud, legal, and permanent. If this hit close to home, if you've ever been betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect you, you're not alone. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done? What would you have said if your own child looked at your life like a prize to steal? I'd love to hear where you're watching from. And if this story reminded you of anything you've lived through or witnessed, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Because stories like these, they deserve to be heard.